Forget about Afghanistan. According to the UN, a humanitarian crisis is unfolding at a fast pace there. And also, in some latest development, the United States has just taken away frozen assets of Afghanistan in the US worth $7 billion. What can the international community do to stop this worsening crisis, Mr. Angle?
Well, they can't, and that's what is at issue here. What Victor was talking about was the hypocrisy of do as I tell you to do, not as I have done. The U.S. has asserted security concerns and rights, invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq, numerous other places. It was used to justify the Monroe Doctrine, which basically said no one can come into our backyard. It was used to justify, assassination attempts and regime overthrows and things like that. So, I mean, the U.S. is not in a position to be lecturing people. Now, two wrongs don't make a right in this particular case. But, at this juncture, there needs to be some way in which, they can back off. And painting the U.S. as evil, or as they're trying to do, paint Russia as evil, is not going to be productive. There has to be an off-ramp at some point. And this issue about U.S. acting high-handedly with other countries, especially Afghanistan, which they invaded, ruled, broke, and then abandoned. And now where 3/4 of the population is facing imminent food shortages, death from starvation. It's very sad, and unfortunately, this whole thing with Ukraine and Russia is overshadowing the bad things that happen to us. We were discussing at the beginning, water does not freeze in 5 minutes. It takes a long time. This fuse was set 15 years ago when Putin came to the Munich Security Council and said, "You have humiliated us, Russia. You have lied to us, and we are now no longer dedicated to maintaining a U.S. European world order in which we are contained and marginalized. If we cannot take our rightful place beside you, we will fight against you." That was 15 years ago. How is it possible people are surprised today that something that was set in motion 15 years ago actually goes? I mean, if I light the fuse of a firework, why am I surprised when it goes off?
Right, gentlemen, we'll be continuing this very soon. You're watching a special coverage on CGTN on China's annual political season. Stay with us.
From common prosperity and economic progress to green development and diplomacy, lawmakers and advisors gather for China's annual political sessions to discuss the biggest topics concerning the nation. CGTN takes you inside the two sessions to see how China's political bodies make decisions and set the agenda for the future of the nation. Only on CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. This is a special coverage on China's annual political season. A press conference from Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is coming up very soon. Our reporter Tang Bo has more details from the Great Hall of the People in central Beijing.
Just like the press conference of the National People's Congress held on Friday, that because of the COVID prevention measures, there's no media in the room. Instead, they are staying in the media center for the two sessions and get connected through video link. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi will take questions on China's foreign policies. For the upcoming press conference, the four major topics are going to be touched upon. The first one, of course, is the Russian-Ukraine tensions. The two sessions are taking place when the crisis is stirring up the world situation. And also the second one is the Sino-US relations. It is always the most watched one at the annual press conference on the sideline of the two sessions. We need to know that China is still facing a very high tariff and continued technological containment from the US. And China may also receive a further scrutiny from the US after Washington accused Beijing of allegedly missing some targets of the Phase 1 trade deal. And the third one is the market opening and import promises that media has been reporting that China is determined in pushing forward the regional comprehensive economic partnership and seek to join the so-called the comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the last one, of course, is the defense budget. According to a draft budget plan released on Saturday, that China plans to raise its annual defense budget by 7.1% to 1.45 trillion yuan, approximately $230 for the 2022 fiscal year. That's a seventh straight year of a single-digit growth. And if approved by the lawmakers, it's gonna the proposed expenditure will mark the return of a 7+% of increase after slightly lower increase in 2020 and 2021. So I guess media would like to find out why.
Last Saturday, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang reviewed government work last year in his report to the 5th session of the 13th National People's Congress, where he elaborated on China's diplomacy strategy for the year 2022.
We must pursue an independent foreign policy of peace, stay on the path of peaceful development, work for a new type of international relations, and endeavor to build a human community with a shared future. We will pursue the Global Development Initiative and promote the shared values of all humanity. China will always work to safeguard world peace, contribute to world development, and preserve international order. We stand ready to work with all others in the international community to make new and greater contributions to promoting world peace, stability, development, and prosperity.
For more than 2 years, the pandemic has battered economies and people's livelihoods all around the world. How can the world work together to win the battle against COVID? And what's China's role in this endeavor? Liu Xin spoke to China's State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi for his view.
The COVID-19 pandemic is still spreading around the world. What has China done in terms of helping unite the world to fight against the virus and helping trace in a scientific manner the origins of the virus, and also helping the economic recovery of the world?
Since COVID-19 hit, the whole of China has united as one and launched a science-based response, setting a good example of COVID containment for the international community. While bringing the virus under control domestically, China has, from the very beginning, been committed to helping others affected by the virus. We took the initiative to engage in international cooperation against COVID and made contribution to global public health security. China started with global emergency humanitarian assistance, kicking off the first half of the international campaign against the coronavirus with a focus on providing emergency supplies. Up until now, China has provided about 372 billion masks, over 4.2 billion protective suits, and over 8.4 billion testing kits to the international community. Early this year, we began focusing on vaccine cooperation as the international campaign against the virus entered its second half. I wish to take this opportunity to announce that as of 26 December, China has provided more than 2 billion doses of COVID vaccines to over 120 countries and international organizations. China has fulfilled the pledge and commitment made by President Xi Jinping to the rest of the world and has become the biggest provider of outbound vaccines among all countries. 1 out of every 2 COVID vaccines administered across the globe is made in China. For many countries, especially developing countries, the first batch of vaccines and the majority of the vaccines they have received came from China. This sets China apart from certain countries which only make empty promises. Not long ago, President Xi Jinping announced that China will provide another 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines to Africa, including 600 million doses as a donation, to help African countries achieve the goal set by the African Union of vaccinating 60% of the African population by 2022. China will also donate additional 150 million doses to ASEAN countries. We support Chinese companies in transferring technologies to developing countries and have launched joint vaccine production with 20 countries. All in all, China did not do any of this for selfish geopolitical interest, and China did not attach any political strings to these actions at all. Rather, we are taking concrete actions to help build a great wall of immunization for the health of all and a health shield for developing countries.
So, gentlemen, we've heard so many hotspot issues from the past year. So, Professor, how would you characterize China's diplomacy in the year 2021?
Well, I think China demonstrated to the whole world that China pursued a policy of peace and stability, and China wants to be a champion of free trade and market economy, and China wants to share its successes with as many countries as possible. Now, this is fully reflected, just like Foreign Minister Wang Yi said just now, in China's support and contribution to the global fight against the pandemic, especially helping other developing countries in terms of supplying them with vaccines and PPEs of all kinds, etc. And this is truly with the aim of enabling mankind as a whole to fight off the virus in a scientific way, rather than putting politics above science. Now, this foreign policy, as demonstrated by China in 2021, is continued into 2022, especially when war has broken out in certain part of the world. China is a pillar of peace and stability, and China is urging all the countries involved to negotiate for a solution, and China is, I believe, prepared to offer good mediation to bring the war to an end as quickly as possible with minimum civilian losses. This is what China stands for, a force for peace and stability and diplomacy and negotiations, and a force for welfare of all countries in the world.
What's your take on this, Mr. Tangen, especially from the perspective of this diplomatic philosophy, if you will, building a community of a shared future for mankind?
Well, I mean, China's been very consistent about that, but I see last year as a watershed year. In the past, China was apt to just kind of wait and react to whatever, especially the U.S., was bringing to the table. But as you saw in Alaska and then in Tianjin, China has become more assertive, not waiting for somebody else's agenda, but putting its agenda out there and forcefully, and not taking any more, guff, as they say. And I think what this represents is China is much more confident about its actions, not only domestically, but internationally. And, as Victor was talking about, this whole issue about producing vaccines, as you heard from the report, the numbers are overwhelming. China has been the single greatest source for vaccines, which are dearly needed by especially developing countries. It's the only one who's broken through the logjam of IP sharing. One exception in the U.S. So, China is now hooked on this idea that it's going to demonstrate what it does and define itself by its actions, as opposed to, just saying a lot of stuff about other countries.
Right, talking about China's role in the global fight against the pandemic, actually figures released from the two sessions last Friday that actually so far China has donated 2.1 billion doses of vaccines to 120 countries and international organizations. That accounts for almost 1/3 of all the vaccines that have been donated or distributed so far around the world. Having said that, Professor, what about another specific initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative? How's that developing in the past year?
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative is designed to promote connectivity of all kinds in different parts of the world. And this is originated from China's experience that in order to really make your economic development, you need to build roads and connectivities. And when China looked around into different parts of the world, the lack of infrastructure connectivity is a major hurdle for many countries' economic advancement. So China wants to share its expertise and experience with many countries. And the Belt and Road Initiative is designed to promote connectivity of all kinds: roads, highways, railways, high-speed railways, airports, seaports, you name it, and financial connectivity and cyber connectivity, so that people in different parts of the world can really engage with each other at a premium for the goods they produce, for the services they can offer. And then this is a very effective way to fight off poverty and to improve living standards of the people. I think more and more countries realize that China does not have an ideological or geopolitical agenda behind the One Belt and One Road initiative. China really wants to really share its own experience and success story with many countries in the world. And China believes the more connectivity projects there are, China benefits, but all the other participating countries benefit. And those countries which do not participate in the One Belt, One Road, One initiative will also benefit, because the greater connectivity is a liberating force for global trade and exchange of people. So I believe more and more countries will participate in this initiative, and in the coming years, the efficiency to be liberated by this initiative will be felt by more countries in the world. It's truly a landmark change for many countries in the world.
Right, now let's talk a little bit more about...
I want to add something
yes,
on
sure,
top of that. I really think this is another watershed year for China, because China had gotten into situations where they did projects based on government to government, and often those were politically motivated because these are countries that are democracies. Getting a project in your home backyard is very beneficial to you. So now you start to see China moving more towards a project base. So they really want to know the feasibility and things like that. Institutions like the AIIB and others are really kind of helping this. So China's taking a much more pragmatic and realistic way to make sure that the Belt and Roads is sustainable. And I think the cherry on top of the cake was, of course, Argentina joining.
Right, and let me follow up on your earlier comments about China-US relations. We know that the two countries have just marked a big moment, that is the 50th anniversary of President Richard Nixon's visit to China, and eventually, of course, the Shanghai Communique, one of the milestones for the two countries' bilateral ties. Do you think the two countries can learn from that period in history?
And I don't think so. I think the ship has sailed on that for a little while. Right now, you see increasingly kind of you're either with us or against us kind of talk, and this is applying to domestically in the U.S. They're now starting to censor anybody who even dares to speak the truth. There was a prominent Chicago professor, and some student is demanding he be kicked out simply because he was pointing out the factual truth that's out there, not giving an opinion. He was just simply reciting the facts. And that, for some people now, is unbearable. And you see this in politics, but it's now coming over to science. We saw this with COVID-19. People just didn't want to believe it. They wanted to select their own facts and come up with these weird ideas about injecting bleach and things like this. We live in a kind of post-fact, post-hypocritical world. And unfortunately, that does not mean that you're going to go back to being rational anytime soon.
What's your take on this, Professor? Do you think the ship has really sailed?
Well, I listened very carefully to what Einan has said. To a very large extent, he's correct. However, I tend to disagree to a very large point, mainly because I think before President Nixon's visit to China 50 years ago, China-US hostility was even more comprehensive and deeply rooted than whatever animosities between China and the United States today. Secondly, China has no desire of becoming an enemy of the United States. And I truly believe the American people and the Chinese people are not destined to be enemies against each other. Why? To a very large extent, it's because China has no hostility against the American people. And China as a country has no desire of replacing the United States as the top dog in the world. What's the fun of being the top dog? If the Americans really want to remain the top dog, be my guest. I would say China has no desire of becoming the next top dog of the world. That means while there were American politicians who have poisoned China-US relations, they have misled the American people. There are lots of people in the United States who believe that China is the enemy, and some will even go to the length of saying between China and the United States there is a destined to war scenario. China and the United States are destined to war. I firmly rebuke this. I cannot accept this. I believe between China and the United States, at least in the medium and longer term, there is this inevitable peace. Why? Because war between China and the United States will be mutually destructive, and only peace and only getting along with each other will save both China and the United States. especially when China has no desire of fighting a war against the United States or replacing the United States as the top dog of the world. So I'm very optimistic about the medium and longer term relations of China and the United States. We need to overcome the current difficulties, very, very challenging difficulties, but keep faith. The Chinese people and the American people are destined to be friends with each other.
And as we're talking about this, gentlemen, we're watching live footage from the Great Hall of the People. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is going to meet the press very soon in several minutes' time. And this will be a high-profile event, one of the high-profile events during China's annual political season. Of course, we've talked about so many hotspot issues, China-US relations, the global fight against a pandemic, and Afghanistan, of course, and many other uncertainties in the world order nowadays. And according to my colleagues at venue, those issues may be touched upon during this important occasion. Now, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has entered the venue. It's Monday afternoon in Beijing. Chinese Foreign Minister, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is meeting the press. And due to COVID control and prevention requirements, this press conference will be held via video link. And Foreign Minister is at the Great Hall of the People, and all the international journalists are at the media center.
Friends from the media, good afternoon. Welcome to the press conference of the 5th session of the 13th National People's Congress on China's foreign policy and external relations. The press center is pleased to have invited State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi to join us and answer your questions. I now give the floor to Mr. Wang Yi.
Friends from the media, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to meet you again. For the world, the year ahead continues to be full of challenges. The world has not completely defeated COVID-19, and yet it is now facing the Ukraine crisis. The international situation, already rife with uncertainties, is becoming more complex and fluid. At such a critical moment, countries need solidarity, not division, dialogue, not confrontation. As a responsible major country, China will continue to hold high the banner of multilateralism. We will work with all peace-loving and development-seeking countries to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, jointly meet challenges, and continue to promote the building of a community with a shared future for mankind. We will strive together for a bright and better future for the world. With these words, I'm ready to take your questions.
请北区第三排第一位男士提问，谢谢。
好，谢谢主持人，王国伟好，我是总台央视记者。我们都知道北京冬奥会成功举办啊，这在当前国际形势和新冠疫情的这样一个局面下，实属难能可贵啊。有国际人士评价说啊，他说和2008年北京相比，那今天的中国呢就更为的自信和强大了，国际地位和影响力今非昔比。对此您怎么看？谢谢。
China Central Television. The Beijing Olympic Winter Games has been a great success. Some foreigners say that China has more confidence, strength, and international influence than it staged the Olympic Games in 2008. What is your view?
With the joint efforts of China and the international community, the Beijing Olympic Winter Games has achieved a full success. We have presented to the world a streamlined, safe, and splendid games, and a more confident, self-reliant, open, and inclusive China. Around 170 official representatives from close to 70 countries and international organizations were at the opening ceremony, supporting China with concrete actions. Here, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to friends from all countries that have participated in and supported Beijing 2022. Beijing 2022 is not only a success for China, but also a success for the world. It represents not just the triumph of sport, but more importantly, the triumph of solidarity. The Games was held amid the spread of Omicron and rising tensions over regional hotspots. It also faced politically motivated attempts of disruption and sabotage by a handful of countries. Under such circumstances, it was inspiring to see that the overwhelming majority of countries and people chose to unite under the Olympic spirit, bringing hope to people beset by the pandemic and confidence to a world overshadowed by instability. As we speak, athletes from around the world are giving their best performance on the Winter Paralympic field of play. I'm confident that the light of unity and cooperation created by the Olympic and Paralympic Games will shine through mist and rain and illuminate the path for humanity to jointly forge ahead into the future. Thank you.
下一个问题，请南区第二排右旗第3位，路透社胡伟聪。
Good afternoon, State Councillor Wang. I'm from Reuters. On Ukraine, is China disappointed in Russia's conduct in Ukraine, in which hundreds of civilians have died and more than 1.5 million people have been made refugees? Many observers have asked why China has not yet to describe this as a case of one country invading another. Are you concerned that China's refusal to condemn Russia's attack diminishes China's international standing? Can China do more, including leveraging on its partnership with Russia and President Putin to resolve the conflict? Thank you.
俄军在乌克兰的行动已经扩展到非军事设施，导致许多平民丧生，产生了150万难民。中方是否对此感到失望？中方为何仍未将此描述为入侵？您是否担心中方应拒绝谴责俄罗斯损害自身的国际地位？中方能否做更多努力，包括通过利用同俄罗斯和普京总统的伙伴关系，帮助解决冲突？
The situation in Ukraine is on top of the mind of the international community, and the Chinese side has made our position quite clearly on a few occasions. We have always made an independent judgment of the situation and made our position clear based on the merits of the situation in an objective way. As a Chinese proverb puts it, it takes more than one cold day to freeze 3 feet of ice. The situation in Ukraine has become what it is today for a variety of complex reasons. What is needed to solve complex issues is a cool head and a rational mind, not adding fuel to the fire, which only intensifies the situation. China believes that to resolve the current crisis, we must uphold the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and respect and protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries. We must adhere to the principle of indivisible security and accommodate the legitimate security concerns of the parties involved. We must settle disputes by peaceful means through dialogue and negotiation, and we must keep in mind the long-term peace and stability of the region and put in place a balanced, effective and sustainable European security architecture. As things stand, the international community must make continuous efforts on 2 priorities. One priority is to facilitate dialogue for peace. China has made some efforts in this regard and had close communications with the relevant parties. On the second day of the conflict, President Xi Jinping spoke to President Vladimir Putin on the phone and expressed China's desire to see Russia and Ukraine hold peace talks as early as possible. President Putin responded positively, and Russia and Ukraine have since had 2 rounds of talks. We hope that the upcoming 3rd round will make further progress. China believes that the more tense the situation, the more important that the talks continue. The wider the disagreement, the greater the need to sit down and have negotiation. China is prepared to continue playing a constructive role to facilitate dialogue for peace and work alongside the international community when needed to carry out necessary mediation. The other priority is to prevent a massive humanitarian crisis. To this end, China wishes to propose a 6-point initiative. First, make sure that humanitarian operations abide by the principles of neutrality and impartiality and avoid politicizing humanitarian issues. Second, give full attention to the displaced persons in and from Ukraine and provide them with proper shelter. Third, ensure the protection of civilians and prevent secondary humanitarian disasters in Ukraine. Fourth, provide for safe and smooth humanitarian aid activities, including providing rapid, safe, and unimpeded humanitarian access. Fifth, provide for the safety of foreign nationals in Ukraine, allow them safe departure, and help them return to their home countries. And sixth, support the UN's coordinating role in channeling humanitarian aid and the work of the UN Crisis Coordinator for Ukraine. China will continue its efforts to stem the humanitarian crisis. I wish to announce that the Red Cross Society of China will provide Ukraine with a tranche of emergency humanitarian supplies as soon as possible. Thank you.
请南区第一排靠中间的第二位女士提问。
谢谢。我是凤凰卫视、凤凰网、凤凰秀的记者倪晓文。这个问题也跟乌克兰有关。我们知道，当前世界是面临百年未有之大变局，进入了动荡变革期。那近期的乌克兰局势也是印证了这一点。所以，国际社会也担忧世界会再次面临分裂和对抗的风险，形成新的冷战。请问国卫对此怎么看？谢谢。
Phoenix Television. The world is experiencing profound changes and more turbulence, as we can see in the situation in Ukraine. The international community is concerned about the growing risk of division and confrontation and the potential for a new Cold War. What is your view?
The world is indeed far from being tranquil. Profound changes unseen in a century are unfolding before our eyes. Some major country, trying to hold on to its hegemony, has resurrected Cold War mentality and stoked bloc confrontation. This has fueled instability and division and added trouble to a world already facing so many challenges. What should be done? China firmly believes that the right way forward lies in greater solidarity and cooperation under the banner of multilateralism and joint efforts to build a community with a shared future for mankind. As President Xi Jinping observes, amidst the raging torrents of a global crisis, countries are not riding separately in some 190 small boats, but rather all in a giant ship on which our shared destiny hinges. Small boats may not survive a storm, but a giant ship is strong enough to brave a storm. First and foremost, we must preserve peace. Peace is a premise and foundation for development of all kinds. Countries need to follow the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, reject the notion of exclusive or absolute security, and stay committed to seizing conflicts through negotiation, resolving disputes through dialogue, and increasing mutual trust through cooperation to jointly build a world of enduring peace. Second, we must enhance solidarity. Diversity is what makes our world an exciting place. Differences should not become a cause for confrontation. Countries should champion true multilateralism, advocate the common values of humanity, oppose hegemony and power politics, and oppose bloc politics. We must safeguard the UN-centered international system and uphold the basic norms of international relations based on the purposes of the UN Charter as we work to make the global governance system more fair and equitable. Third, we must uphold openness. Economic globalization is the trend of the times, and like it or not, it is here to stay and not to be stopped by geopolitical competition. We must say no to all forms of protectionism and isolationism and firmly uphold a free, fair and non-discriminatory multilateral trading system. We should tear down small yards with high fences and build open markets instead. Fourth, we must strengthen cooperation. Faced with challenges of a global nature, no country can stay aloof or unaffected. We must pull together in these trying times, enhance communication and coordination on COVID-19, terrorism, climate change, cybersecurity, and other global issues, build maximum consensus, and pursue convergence of interests wherever possible. In a world of instability and transformation, China always serves as an anchor for stability and a force for good, and always stands on the right side of history. We will continue to keep a global perspective, honor our responsibilities, and hold high the banner of peace, development, and win-win cooperation to promote the building of a new type of international relations and a community with a shared future for mankind. China will work with all progressive forces in the world for development and together for a shared future. Thank you.
下一个问题，请南区第3排今日俄罗斯阿塞提问。
大家好，请问西方对俄罗斯和中国日益增长的集体制裁压力将如何影响俄中关系的进一步发展？谢谢。
International media group Rossiya Sevotnya. The West is ratcheting up sanctions on Russia, with repercussions for China as well. How will this affect Russia-China relations?
China and Russia are both permanent members of the UN Security Council and each other's most important close neighbors and strategic partners. Our relationship is one of the most crucial bilateral relations in the world. Our cooperation not only advances the interests of both peoples, but also contributes to peace, stability, and development in the world. Last year, the two sides commemorated the 20th anniversary of the China-Russia Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation. Given the increasingly complex international strategic landscape, our shared commitment to everlasting friendship and mutually beneficial cooperation, as enshrined in the treaty, is highly relevant and important not only to both sides, but also to countries across the world. I wish to stress that the China-Russia relationship is valued for its independence. It is based on non-alliance, non-confrontation, and non-targeting of any third party. We are determined that it is free from interference or discord sown by third parties. This is both what historical experience has taught us and an innovation in international relations. Not long ago, the two sides issued a joint statement on international relations entering a new era and global sustainable development. It sends an unequivocal message to the world that China and Russia jointly oppose attempts to revive the Cold War mindset or provoke ideology-based confrontation, and stand for greater democracy in international relations, as well as the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The China-Russia relationship is grounded in a clear logic of history and driven by strong internal dynamics, and the friendship between Chinese and Russian peoples is rock solid. There is a bright prospect for cooperation between the two sides. No matter how precarious and challenging the international situation may be, China and Russia will maintain strategic focus and steadily advance our comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for a new era. Thank you.
第4排，靠中间的第2位男士提问。
谢谢主持人，王国伟您好，我是新华社记者。近日来我们关注到中国从乌克兰陆续撤出了多批中国公民。我们注意到，在中国驻乌克兰的使领馆克服困难，做了大量的组织协调工作，保护了在当地中国公民的安全。在报道中，我们也看到有中国留学生非常动情地说：“我们的护照就是硬通货。”因为我们身后有强大的祖国，所以我想请问外长，您对此怎么看？能否介绍一下有关的情况？谢谢。
Xinhua News Agency. The Chinese embassy is working hard to evacuate Chinese nationals from Ukraine. Many Chinese students in Ukraine are grateful for what their mother country is doing for them. Can you share more information with us?
With tensions escalating in Ukraine, The CPC Central Committee and the State Council are highly concerned about the safety of every Chinese national in Ukraine. General Secretary Xi Jinping has taken a personal interest, repeatedly asked about the situation, and demanded all-out efforts to ensure the safety of Chinese nationals. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has activated its consular emergency response mechanism, both maintaining diplomatic communications with Ukraine, Russia, and countries in the neighborhood, and issuing safety alerts and reminders for Chinese compatriots in Ukraine. In the immediate aftermath of the dramatic developments on the ground, we acted promptly to help Chinese nationals in Ukraine to take shelter and provided timely assistance to those in need. Meanwhile, we are seizing the window of opportunity to organize emergency evacuation of Chinese nationals. My colleagues at the Chinese Embassy in Ukraine and the Consulate General in Odessa are taking great personal risks to arrange for the safe passage of Chinese nationals. Chinese embassies in the neighboring countries of Ukraine are working around the clock and leaving no stone unturned to provide shelter for and facilitate the departure of our compatriots. Relevant government departments and various Chinese localities have also been coordinating closely to send multiple charter flights to bring our compatriots home from various European cities. As we worked on the safety and evacuation of Chinese nationals, the government and various sectors of society in Ukraine showed goodwill and provided facilitation. Countries including Russia, Moldova, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Belarus also provided invaluable support. What they have done is an expression of great friendship toward the Chinese people. On behalf of the Chinese side, I would like to say a hearty thank you to the governments and peoples of those countries. During the evacuation, the Chinese community in Ukraine and neighboring countries, including Chinese students and firms, mobilized every resource at their disposal and worked closely with each other. This once again shows the Chinese virtue of solidarity in the face of challenges. I wish to give them my warm and sincere regards. As we speak, there are still some Chinese nationals in Ukraine due to the local situation or for personal reasons. Our thoughts are with them. We're in close touch with them and are prepared to provide all possible assistance in response to their needs. The world is not yet a tranquil place. As an online comment reads, we don't live in a peaceful world, but we are lucky to have a motherland that seeks and enjoys peace. Serving the people is the abiding commitment of the Chinese diplomatic service. With everything we do, we will continue to show every one of our compatriots overseas that we stand with you at all times, wherever you may be, and your motherland will always have your back. Thank you.
请北区第3排左起第3位 NBC Eric。
Thank you. NBC News about China-U.S. relations. State Councilor Wang Yi, you recently urged the United States to, quote, reinstate a reasonable, pragmatic China policy to put relations on the right track, even expressing willingness to work with the United States on the Build Back Better World global infrastructure plan, for example. But are you not worried that bilateral relations could, in fact, only worsen in the months and years ahead, given what's considered a bipartisan consensus in the United States to intensify competition with China across the board? Thank you.
美国全国广播公司，您近期敦促美方重拾理性务实的对华政策，推动双边关系重回正轨，并表示愿考虑同美方在重建更好世界全球基础设施倡议方面进行协调，但考虑到全面对华竞争已成为美两党共识，您是否担心中美关系下一步会持续恶化？
Since the start of last year, President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden have had a virtual meeting and 2 phone conversations. Meanwhile, the 2 sides have had dialogue and interactions at other levels. U.S. leaders and senior officials have stated that the U.S. has no intention to seek a new Cold War or change China's system, that the revitalization of U.S. alliances is not anti-China. and the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence, and that it is not looking for conflict or confrontation with China. Regrettably, however, these statements are just verbal assurances and have yet to be put into practice. The reality we have seen is this. The U.S. is going to great lengths to engage in intense zero-sum competition with China. It keeps provoking China on issues concerning our core interests, and it is taking a string of actions to piece together small blocks to suppress China. These actions undermine the overall China-U.S. relations and disrupt and erode international peace and stability. This is not how a responsible power should act, or how a credible country does things. China is an independent, sovereign country. We have every right to do what is necessary to firmly defend our legitimate interests. In China's view, major country competition should not be the order of the day. A zero-sum game is not the right choice. In a globalized and interdependent world, how China and the U.S. find the right way forward and manage to get along is both a new question for humanity and a formulation that must be worked out by China and the U.S. together. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Shanghai Communique. Looking back, China and the U.S., in the spirit of seeking common ground while reserving differences, were able to replace confrontation with cooperation, advance the interests of our two peoples, and make the world a more peaceful and prosperous place. Looking ahead, the two sides need to re-embrace the conviction that helped us break the ice 50 years ago and set out on a new journey. We must replace the competitive, collaborative, adversarial trichotomy with the three principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. Return the China policy of the U.S. to the right track, guided by reason and pragmatism, and to put China-U.S. relations back on the right path of healthy, stable development.
请南区第5排艾菲社 Santino。
Good afternoon. I'm from AFP Spanish News Agency. So my question is, does China believe that its close relation with Russia amid the conflict in Ukraine may affect its relation with the European Union? Thank you.
艾菲社记者，您认为日益密切的中俄关系以及乌克兰危机是否会影响中国同欧盟的关系？
中俄关系和中欧关系完全是两个问题。
China-Russia relationship
那么就
and China-Europe
中欧关系
relations
而言，
are
我认
separate.
为中国和欧洲是维护世界和平的两大力量。
In our view, China
也
and
是促进共
Europe
同发
are
展
two major forces for world peace,
更是
two
推
big
动人类
markets
进步
for
的
common
大动力
development, and two great
中
civilizations
欧关
for
系
human
不
progress.
针对不依
The
附
China-Europe
也不受制于
relationship
第三
is not targeted at any third party,
双方在
nor
相
is
互
it
尊重、
subjugated
互利共
to
赢基
or
础上开
controlled
展对
by
话
any
合作
third party. Dialogue and cooperation
将为
between the two
动荡的
sides
世界
on the basis of mutual
提供更多
respect
的稳
and
定
mutual benefit will add more stabilizing
我们看到
factors
中欧合
to an
作去年取
unstable
得了积
world.
极成果。
China
我仅
and
举两
Europe
个例子
had fruitful cooperation in
一个是中国同
2021. Let me
欧
give
盟
you
的
two
贸易额
examples. China-EU
首
trade
次突破
exceeded
800亿美元，
$800 billion
8000亿
last year
少说一个零，
for the
这充
first
分说
time,
明中欧经贸关系高度
underscoring the high complementarity
去
of
年
the
的
economic
中
and
欧
trade
班列
ties.
开
The
行
China-Europe Railway
15000
Express
多列，
ran more
同比
than
增长了
15,000 cargo trips, up
为
by
推动
29%
国际
year
抗疫
on
合作
year,
确保产
and
业
played
链
an
供应稳
active
定
role in promoting
也为促进
international cooperation
全球的经
against
济复苏
COVID-19,
发挥了积极
ensuring the stability of industrial and supply
当然我们
chains,
看到
and facilitating global
还
economic
是有些势力
recovery.
他们并不愿意看
That
到
said,
中欧关系
some
稳定发
forces
展，
are unhappy to
编造了
see
所
the
谓
steady
中国威
growth of
胁，
China-Europe
炒作对
relations.
华竞争，
They
鼓
fabricate the
吹
narrative of
制度
China
性对
threat,
手，
play
甚
up
至挑起
competition
制
with
裁
China,
对抗。
clamor for seeing China as a systemic
我希
rival,
望中
and
欧双
even
方
impose
都对
sanctions
此
and provoke
高度警惕。
confrontation with China.
中欧合
Both
作
China and Europe
已经历
must
经
be on high
几
alert
十年风雨，
against these developments.
植根于坚实
China-Europe
的利益基础
cooperation going through decades of ups and downs, is deeply rooted in solid public support, extensive common interests, and similar strategic needs. Such cooperation enjoys great resilience and potential. It cannot be reversed by any force. China views its relations with Europe from a strategic, long-term perspective. China's policy toward Europe is firm and consistent. It will not be affected by any turn of events. We will continue to support the independence of Europe and a united and prosperous EU. In the meantime, we hope that Europe will develop a more independent and objective perception of China, adopt a more pragmatic and rational China policy, and work with China to oppose a new Cold War and uphold and act on true multilateralism. Going forward, the two sides need to work together for the success of the China-EU summit and other important events on the political agenda. We will seek greater strategic synergy, expand practical cooperation, advance multilateral coordination, deepen people-to-people exchange, and properly manage differences, so as to jointly deliver more concrete benefits to the world. Thank you.
请继续提问。请北区第二排北起第二位女士提问。
好，谢谢主持人。王国伟您好，我是总台国广记者。我的问题呢是有关于“一带一路”。那么自2013年提出以来呢，“一带一路”在世界范围内引起了非常大的反响。那么实际上我们也看到它的增速是非常明显的。但是近年来，可能由于受到疫情等相关因素的影响，“一带一路”的发展势头似乎有所减弱。所以想请问，中方是如何来看待这样的情况？将采取怎样的措施？谢谢。
China Radio International. The Belt and Road Initiative has been welcomed worldwide, yet COVID-19 seems to have hindered its progress. How does China see the situation, and what will China do in response?
Despite the impact of the pandemic and other factors, Belt and Road cooperation has maintained a sound momentum. Over the past year, the hard connectivity of infrastructure made solid progress. Major projects such as the China-Laos Railway and the new Haifa port in Israel were completed. The construction and operation of projects in relation to the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the Piraeus Port, the Jakarta-Bandung High-Speed Rail, and the Budapest-Belgrade Railway advanced steadily. The China-Europe Railway Express reached new records in the number of freight services and the amount of cargo transportation, providing a strong boost to economic recovery in relevant countries. The institutional connectivity of rules and standards yielded fruitful results. Since the start of last year, 10 more countries have signed Belt and Road cooperation documents with China, extending the BRI family to 118 members. A successful Asia and Pacific high-level conference on Belt and Road cooperation was held, and the initiatives for Belt and Road partnership on vaccine cooperation and green development have both received wide support. The people-to-people connectivity, featuring mutual help and assistance, continue to deepen. We have given strong support to other countries in their fight against COVID-19 and are working on joint vaccine production with 20 developing country partners, most of which are BRI partner countries. A large number of small yet smart assistance programs have been steadily carried out to help people in partner countries improve income and livelihood. What I have shared with you can aptly show that Belt and Road cooperation is moving forward with more partners, stronger foundation, and brighter prospects. It is sure to bring new development opportunities to the post-COVID world. Going forward, we will do as President Xi Jinping said at last year's third symposium on the BRI and work with the international community to continue advancing high-quality Belt and Road cooperation. We will aim for higher-level cooperation, better cost-effectiveness, higher quality supply, and stronger development resilience to make the BRI a belt of development to the benefit of the world and a road to happiness for people of all countries. Thank you.
请北区第一排联合早报黄小芳提问。
谢谢主持人。新加坡联合早报记者提问：美国正以印太地区作为战略重点，有学者认为这可能制衡中国的影响力。中国如何评估印太地区和印太四国的概念？它对本区域会带来什么影响？谢谢。
联合早报 The United States is turning its focus to the Asia-Pacific to counterbalance China's influence in the region. What is China's take on the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy and the Quad and their implication for the region?
The U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy is becoming a byword for bloc politics. The United States professes a desire to advance regional cooperation, but in reality, it is stoking geopolitical rivalry. It talks a lot about returning to multilateralism, but in reality, it is forming exclusive clubs. It claims to uphold international rules, but in reality, it is setting and imposing rules that suit itself and its acolytes. From strengthening the Five Eyes to peddling the Quad, from piecing together AUKUS to tightening bilateral military alliances, the U.S. is staging a 5-4-3-2 formation in the Asia-Pacific. This is by no means some kind of blessing for the region, but a sinister move to disrupt regional peace and stability. The real goal of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy is to establish an Indo-Pacific version of NATO. It seeks to maintain the U.S.-led system of hegemony, undermine the ASEAN-centered regional cooperation architecture, and compromise the overall and long-term interests of countries in the region. The perverse actions run counter to the common aspiration of the region for peace, development, cooperation, and win-win outcomes. They are doomed to fail. The Asia-Pacific is a promising land for cooperation and development, not a chessboard for geopolitical contest. With its root struck deep in the Asia-Pacific, China is committed to the region's stability and prosperity. We welcome all initiatives that meet regional realities and the needs of relevant parties, and resolutely oppose all acts that lead to confrontation and dividing camps in the region. China wants all parties to join us in doing the right thing and staying on the right course. Together, we will reject attempts to create small, divisive circles in the Indo-Pacific and instead foster a broad, inclusive platform for Asia-Pacific cooperation, leading to an Asia-Pacific community with a shared future. Thank you.
3位女士。
谢谢主持人，王国伟您好，我是人民日报记者。世界经济复苏面临严峻挑战，习近平主席提出的全球发展倡议受到国际社会广泛关注和期待。您能否介绍倡议推进落实的最新进展？谢谢。
People's Daily. Given the challenges to global recovery, President Xi Jinping's Global Development Initiative has drawn international attention and recognition. Can you share with us the progress in its implementation?
COVID-19 has indeed had a serious impact on the global development process. Developing countries in particular are taking the brunt. It is against this backdrop that President Xi Jinping proposed the GDI at the United Nations, calling on all countries to focus on development, pool their efforts, and meet challenges together. The centerpiece of the GDI is to put people front and center. Its most important goal is to facilitate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Highly responsive to the needs of various parties, the GDI has been warmly received and supported by the UN and nearly 100 countries. In January, representatives from over 100 countries and more than 20 UN agencies attended the launch of the Group of Friends of the GDI at the UN headquarters in New York. Building greater international consensus on implementing the GDI. China believes that good development is sustainable and true development is development for all. China will work with all parties in 4 areas to implement the GDI step by step. First, forging synergy in priority areas. We will focus on the most pressing concerns of developing countries and advance practical cooperation in such areas as poverty reduction, food security, economic recovery, employment training, education, health, and green development, so that all 17 SDGs will be met as scheduled. Second, responding to the needs of all countries. We will follow the spirit of open and inclusive partnership and the principle of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits. We welcome the participation of all parties in flexible ways in light of their needs and strengths. Third, partnering with cooperation mechanisms. We will work with all interested international and regional organizations, and especially the UN system, to seek complementarity with the development processes of small island developing states, landlocked developing countries, and least developed countries. This way, we could give play to the respective strengths of various parties and forge a global synergy. Fourth, reaching out to partners of all sectors. We value the role of the private sector, NGOs, experts, think tanks, and the media in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. We welcome the recommendation and participation of all parties. In short, the GDI is another major initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping after the BRI. It is another clarion call to mobilize global development cooperation and another endorsement of putting people front and center as a core concept of human rights. The GDI has drawn up a roadmap for narrowing the North-South gap and addressing development imbalance, and given a boost to the 2030 Agenda. China will work with all countries to pursue and follow through on the GDI, ensuring that no country or individual is left behind and no aspiration is overlooked, and to jointly build a global community of development. Thank you.
请北区第4排靠中间走廊，亚洲新闻台，常兴。
谢谢亚洲新闻台记者提问。去年是中国和东盟建立对话关系30周年，自那以后 ，RCEP 贸易协定正式生效。想请问，接下来在面临例如防疫、南海问题和缅甸局势的挑战下，中国计划如何深化与东盟的关系？谢谢。
Channel News Asia. China and ASEAN marked 30 years of diplomatic ties last year and have since seen the RCEP trade pact coming into force. In the face of challenges like COVID-19, the South China Sea, and the situation in Myanmar, how does China plan to deepen its relationship with ASEAN? Are there plans to deepen cooperation on COVID-19 and resume connectivity or exchanges?
30 years ago, China and ASEAN established dialogue relations, leading the way for cooperation in the region. 30 years on, China and ASEAN have entered into a comprehensive strategic partnership, setting a prime example of good neighborliness and friendship. Over the past 3 decades, China and ASEAN have embraced the trend of the times, geographic proximity, and cultural affinity, found a broad path of good neighborliness and win-win cooperation, and established a model of most vibrant and promising regional cooperation. The China-ASEAN relations have no limits and are sure to grow even closer. Going forward, China will work with ASEAN countries to keep in mind our regional aspiration of maintaining stability and tranquility, fulfill our shared mission of common development, and uphold the principle of mutual understanding, accommodation, help, and support between good neighbors. China-ASEAN relations will speed ahead like trains on the China-Laos Railway. The two sides will make new progress in building a closer China-ASEAN community with a shared future, and bring greater benefits to the people of both sides.
我们要做国际抗疫合作
China and ASEAN must be forerunners in international cooperation against COVID-19. We will deepen cooperation on joint production of vaccines and research and development of key medicines to build an unbreakable health shield. We will also ensure the smooth operation of the fast track and green lane for the movement of people and goods to keep all people in the region safe and sound.
我们还要做区域
China and
合作
ASEAN must be pace setters in regional cooperation.
RCEP 全面有效
We will move forward comprehensive and effective implementation of RCEP and launch a new round of upgrade of the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area as soon as possible. We will expand cooperation in new areas including blue, green and digital economies and on the new international land-sea trade corridor to set new benchmarks for regional cooperation. China and ASEAN must be defenders of stability in the Asia-Pacific. Peace, stability and prosperity are the common aspiration of regional countries. The Asia-Pacific should not be a chessboard for major power rivalry. ASEAN countries are not chess pieces in a geopolitical contest, but are important chess players who will help promote regional development and prosperity. China will continue to view ASEAN as a high priority in its external relations. We will firmly uphold the ASEAN-centered regional cooperation architecture and the status of Southeast Asia as a nuclear weapon-free zone, safeguard regional peace and stability, support the ASEAN way in the mediation of regional hotspots, and oppose any attempt to revive opposing blocs or stoke division and confrontation in the region. Thank you.
请南区第一排日本共同社提问。
谢谢。日本共同社提问：今年是中日邦交正常化50周年，习近平主席说，今年是重要历史节点，希望开辟两国关系新的发展前景。虽然中日之间还存在着有些分歧，两国各界期待更好的交流。中方如何看待新时代的中日关系？今年中方在国内有什么样的活动计划？谢谢。
Kyodo News. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the normalization of China-Japan relations. President Xi Jinping has said that it should be a historic moment for the two sides to open up new prospects in bilateral relations. There remain some disagreements between China and Japan, but the two societies expect closer interactions. How does China view its relations with Japan in the new era? How will China mark this 50th anniversary?
今年是中日邦交正常化50周年。
As this year marks the 50th anniversary of the normalization of China-Japan relations, it provides an important opportunity for the two sides to review history and shape the future together. 5 decades ago, the older generation of leaders in both countries, in a bid for peace and friendship between our two countries, demonstrated enormous political courage and made the major decision to normalize China-Japan relations. Over the past 5 decades, our expanding exchanges and cooperation have delivered important benefits to our two peoples. Last year, our leaders reached important common understanding on building a China-Japan relationship fit for the new era, charting the future course for our bilateral relations. On the other hand, we are aware of the remaining discord and challenges in the relationship. In particular, there are always some people in Japan who are reluctant to see the rapid development of China and stable China-Japan relations. Here, let me offer 3 pieces of advice to the Japanese side. First, cherish the original aspiration and keep the bilateral relations on the right track. It is important to truly abide by the principles and spirit of the 4 China-Japan political documents, implement such important common understandings as the two countries should be partners, not threats, and support each other's peaceful development. These are crucial for the bilateral relations to develop in the direction of peace and friendship. Second, honor commitments and uphold the political foundation of bilateral relations. Major sensitive issues such as history and Taiwan are foundational to mutual trust between our two countries. If the foundation is shaken, whatever above it cannot stand. we hope that Japan will honor the series of solemn commitments it has made on these issues to avoid serious disruption to our bilateral relations. Third, embrace the trend of the times and jointly create brighter prospects for bilateral relations. The world is becoming a multipolar one, where unilateralism and hegemonism will be replaced by greater democracy in international relations. Cold War alliances and the geopolitical confrontation have long lost people's support. This is the inevitable trend of history. We hope that Japan will go along this trend instead of against it, decline to pull chestnuts out of the fire for others, and avoid pitting itself against its neighbors. This is the way for Japan to truly draw lessons from history and look ahead to the future and contribute its share to regional peace, stability, and development. Thank you.
请北区第一排中间起第5位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王国伟您好，我是中国新闻社的记者。在过去的1年，外交部为帮助海外中国公民纾困解难方面做了大量的工作。那么想请问，今年外交部在继续践行外交为民宗旨方面，我们又会采取哪些新的举措？谢谢。
China News Service. Over the past year, the Foreign Ministry has done a great deal to provide support and help to Chinese nationals abroad. This year, what new measures will the ministry take to serve the people through diplomacy?
The past year has been tough for the many Chinese nationals abroad. The COVID-19 pandemic, natural disasters, political turbulence, and armed conflicts posed constant threats to the safety of Chinese nationals abroad, and for that matter, caused great concern to the people in the motherland. If Chinese nationals abroad cannot come home for the time being, we bring the warmth of home to them. In the course of last year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and China's diplomatic and consular missions abroad did their level best to carry out a spring sprout program around the world to vaccinate millions of Chinese nationals living and working in 180 countries. With the 12308 hotline open 24/7, we handled more than 500,000 calls for help and over 60,000 cases of consular protection and assistance, and rescued several dozen Chinese from their abductors, all part of an all-out effort to protect the life, safety, and legitimate rights and interests of our compatriots abroad. On the eve of China's National Day last year, our unremitting efforts finally paid off, and Ms. Meng Wanzhou, who had spent over 1,000 days in legal detention, was safely back to home. Her remark that if conviction has a color, it must be red, the color for China, struck a deep accord with her 1.4 billion fellow Chinese. Serving the people and addressing their concerns is a bounden duty of China's diplomatic service. Going forward, we will continue to put people first and act as a ready provider of good service to the people and a defender of the interests of our compatriots overseas. This year, we will focus our efforts on the following 3 areas. First, we will develop a platform for smart consular services and provide more services that can be easily accessed through mobile devices to improve digital 24/7 consular services. Second, we will build a system for the protection of Chinese nationals and interests overseas, enhance alert of safety risks, and offer security and self-protection guidance for Chinese businesses to provide more effective and timely safety and security support to our fellow Chinese abroad. Third, we will roll out a plan to facilitate safe, unimpeded travel by upgrading fast lanes for cross-border travel and health certificates for international travelers, so as to facilitate safe, healthy, and convenient international travel. Thank you.
下一个问题，请北区第2排左起第2位韩联社提问。
谢谢主持人。韩国的韩联社提问。朝核问题似乎越来越难以解决。中方作为朝核6方会谈的东道主，请问为重启政治解决的进程，中方有哪些具体方案？ 还有中国政府一贯主张缓解对朝制裁，但是如果朝鲜进行核试验或者发射洲际弹道导弹，请问中方仍会反对加强对朝制裁吗？最后，韩国跟中国马上迎来建交30周年，但最近两国国内对彼此的负面情绪有所上升，中方想怎样发展两国关系？谢谢。
Yonhap News Agency. What specific plans does China have to restart the six-party talks on the Korean nuclear issue? If the DPRK conducts a nuclear test or launches intercontinental missiles, will China still call for respecting the DPRK's legitimate concerns and easing sanctions? And finally, in this 30th anniversary year for China-ROK diplomatic relations, how does China see the future of China-ROK relations?
As an old Chinese saying goes, we must tend to the root cause when curing a disease or remedying a mistake. The root cause for the issues on the Korean Peninsula is that the external security threats facing the DPRK have remained unresolved and its legitimate security concerns unaddressed for too long. To resolve the issues on the Korean Peninsula, parties concerned must meet each other halfway. Since 2018, the DPRK has taken a set of positive steps to get dialogue going. But these steps have not been duly reciprocated. This is not consistent with the action for action principle agreed by all parties. As a result, the already severe trust deficit between the DPRK and the US has further exacerbated, and the various dialogue proposals have become empty slogans. We have taken note of the recent US statement that it harbors no hostile intent toward the DPRK and is ready to address the issues through diplomacy. How the situation will evolve will largely depend on what the US will do, whether it will take the actions needed to settle the issues on the peninsula or continue to use them as a geostrategic leverage. Once again, we call on the US to take concrete measures to address the legitimate security concerns of the DPRK, build basic mutual trust, and follow the dual-track approach and the principle of phased and synchronized actions to advance the political settlement of the issues. China will continue to play a constructive role and do what is necessary to facilitate the endeavor. On China-ROK relations, the two countries are friendly neighbors sharing a deep historical bond. The Chinese people often say, a close neighbor can be more helpful than a distant relative. This is echoed by a similar proverb in the ROK. While a house could be bought with 3 coppers, a good neighbor is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. This year marks the 30th anniversary of China-ROK diplomatic relations. Over the past 3 decades, China-ROK relations have withstood the changing circumstances and achieved all-round and rapid development. Past events have proven that China and ROK are not adversaries, but partners with converging interests, a lot to offer each other, and much untapped cooperation potential. China will work with the ROK and take this year as an opportunity to carry forward our traditional friendship, deepen mutually beneficial cooperation, and achieve greater development together. Thank you.
博塔女士提问。
谢谢主持人。哈萨克斯坦24 K 电视台记者。今年是中国和中亚国家建交30周年。1月，中国同中亚5国举行了建交30周年视频峰会，标志着中国中亚关系进入新时代。各方就深化政治、经贸、文化、人文、安全等领域合作提出了具体建议，为落实包括推动提升中国同中亚国家间边境货物过货量等既定目标，中方计划采取哪些具体措施？谢谢。
Kabar 24 News Channel. This January, China and the 5 Central Asian countries had a virtual summit to mark the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations and plan future cooperation. What will China do to increase cross-border cargo turnover and enhance other areas of cooperation with the 5 countries?
This year has seen a string of major joyous occasions in China's relations with Central Asia. In January, President Xi Jinping had a virtual summit with the presidents of the 5 Central Asian countries to commemorate the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations that was followed by the visits of the 5 presidents to Beijing for a rendezvous with the Winter Olympics. China always believes that a growing, prosperous, stable and dynamic Central Asia is in the common interest of China and other countries in the region. We will continue to follow the principles of mutual respect, good neighborly friendship, solidarity in trying times, and mutual benefit. Jointly build a strategic partnership featuring rich substance, fruitful results, and enduring friendship. And keep working for a China-Central Asia community with a shared future. China's relations with the 5 Central Asian countries, now at a golden age of 30, enjoy a bright prospect of vibrant growth. China will work with the 5 countries to follow up on the outcomes of the 30th anniversary commemorative summit, substantiate and strengthen the China plus 5 Central Asian countries cooperation mechanisms, expand and deepen cooperation in such areas as COVID-19 response, industrial capacity, energy, agriculture, people-to-people exchange, digital economy, and green development, and firmly support each other on issues concerning core interests, so as to build an even closer China-Central Asia community with a shared future, and ushering yet another 3 decades of great achievements for China-Central Asia relations. Thank you.
请南第2排中间起第1位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王国伟您好，环球时报环球网记者杨生提问。不少人认为美国民主正面临着空前的危机，但美国仍不断对中国的民主制度进行抹黑和攻击，把民主作为意识形态划线，打压遏制中国的一张牌。美方去年召开的民主峰会被公认不太成功，甚至十分的失败，但美国仍宣布今年举办线下的所谓民主峰会。对此，请问中方有何评论？打算如何应对？谢谢。
Global Times. American democracy is in crisis, but the United States has not stopped smearing the Chinese system of democracy or using democracy as a pretext for suppressing China. Having hosted a controversial Summit for Democracy last year, the U.S. plans to hold another one this year. How will China respond?
Last year, the U.S. held a summit in the name of promoting democracy. Yet, the so-called Summit for Democracy excluded nearly half of all countries on the planet, blatantly drew an ideological line between countries, and created division in the world. The act violated the spirit of democracy. To hold another such summit would receive even less support around the world. China practices whole process people's democracy. It is broad-based, genuine, and effective democracy which enjoys the wholehearted endorsement and support of the Chinese people. This January, the world's largest public relations consultancy firm, Edelman, released a survey. In 2021, trust among Chinese citizens in their government was a record 91%, again topping the world and reaching the highest level in a decade. Polls conducted by Harvard University for many years also produced similar results. These are polls conducted by third parties, and as we can see, the world recognizes China's democracy, and we have full confidence in our path. Human civilization, if compared to a garden, should be a diverse place where democracy in different countries blooms like 100 flowers. Setting a standard for democracy after the U.S. system is undemocratic. Meddling in other countries' internal affairs in the name of democracy would only hurt the people in those countries. Putting one's own system on the pedestal is not just against the spirit of democracy, but also spells disaster for democracy. We look forward to exchanges and mutual learning with other countries on the basis of equality. Let us promote the true spirit of democracy, strip pseudo-democracy of its various types of charade, and make international relations more democratic so as to inject forward momentum to human progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Bloomberg News. There has been a significant increase in military activity in and around the Taiwan Strait in recent months. This has led many to wonder whether China, like Russia in Ukraine, might soon take action to assert control over territory it views as lost. My questions are, what are the similarities between the two situations? And how likely would you say conflict in the Taiwan Strait is at the moment? Thank you.
彭博社，近期很多人担心中国大陆是否会像俄罗斯对乌克兰一样，对台湾采取行动，以武力收回领土。请问中方认为两者有何异同？如何看待台海发生冲突的可能性？
首先要明确的是啊，
Let me first make it clear that the Taiwan question and the Ukraine issue are different in nature and are not comparable at all. Most fundamentally, Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory, and the Taiwan question is entirely China's internal affairs. The Ukraine issue arose from contention between two countries, namely Russia and Ukraine. Some people, while being vocal about the principle of sovereignty on the Ukraine issue, have kept undermining China's sovereignty and territorial integrity on the Taiwan question. This is a blatant act of double standards. Tension exists in the Taiwan Strait. Its root cause is that the DPP authorities refuse to recognize the One China principle and attempt to change the status quo that both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to one and the same China. The DPP authorities have sought to create two Chinas, or One China, One Taiwan, to misrepresent Taiwan's history and sever Taiwan's roots. This, in the end, will only ruin Taiwan's future. Some forces in the United States, in a bid to hold back China's rejuvenation, have condoned and abetted the growth of separatist forces for Taiwan independence and try to challenge and hollow out the One China principle. This gravely violates the basic norms of international relations and puts the peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait in serious jeopardy. This would not only push Taiwan into a precarious situation, but also bring unbearable consequences for the US side. I must stress that the two sides across the Taiwan Strait share the same historical and cultural roots and belong to one and the same China. Taiwan's future and hope lies in the peaceful development of cross-strait relations and reunification with the mainland, not in counting on the empty promises of external forces. Seeking foreign support to gain independence is a dead end. The scheme to use Taiwan to contain China is doomed to fail. Taiwan will eventually return to the embrace of the motherland. Thank you.
请南区第3排南侧起第一位女士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。王国伟您好，我是中国国际电视台 CGTN 的记者。我们注意到，今年呢，中国将担任金砖国家的主席国。与此同时呢，亚太经合组织20国集团也将在亚洲国家召开。那请教王国伟，中方如何看待这个现象？中国期待新兴和发展中国家在全球治理当中发挥什么样的作用？谢谢。
CGTN. China is in the chair of BRICS this year. APEC and G20 will also be meeting in Asia this year. What role can emerging and developing countries play in global governance?
金砖国家是
BRICS countries are a fine example of emerging markets and developing countries seeking strength from unity and a crucial force for advancing global governance. After 5 years, the baton of the BRICS chairmanship is once again passed to China. We will hold a summit, and we will hold more than 160 events. We will work with other BRICS countries under the theme of forming a high-quality partnership to jointly create a new era of global development, to deepen BRICS cooperation across the board, make BRICS shine brighter, burnish BRICS credentials for South-South cooperation, and inspire hope and confidence for a joint effort by all countries to beat the pandemic and promote global recovery. We will guide the reform of the global governance system with the principles of equity and justice and put forth BRICS proposals for improving global governance in the post-COVID era. We will prioritize vaccine cooperation and expand public health collaboration to cement BRICS' defense against the COVID-19 pandemic. We will fully advance cooperation in such areas as economy, trade, finance, innovation, digital economy, green development, and poverty reduction to create a BRICS fast track for global development. And we will deepen BRICS Plus cooperation, strengthen strategic coordination among EMDCs, and make BRICS contributions to building a global development partnership. In the course of this year, China, Thailand, and Indonesia will host the BRICS Summit, APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, and the G20 Summit, respectively. Asia's time has come in global governance. In a race of global governance, we look forward to seeing EMDCs turning from followers to forerunners and even pace-setters. Together, we can play a more active role, speak with a bigger voice, help make the international order more just and equitable, and promote more open, inclusive, balanced, and win-win globalization for all. Thank you.
下一个问题，请南区第6排靠中间走廊 ，PTI Vama。
Thank you from PTI. This is the third year that the India-China relations have remained at the rock bottom. We have not seen any change in whatsoever in the relationship improving or even going forward. Can we see some silver lining this year? And how do you see the prospects of India-China relations this year? Thank you.
印度报业托拉斯，印中关系已连续3年持续低迷，中方如何看待今年两国关系发展前景？
China-India relations have encountered some setbacks in recent years, which do not serve the fundamental interests of the two countries and the two peoples. As regards the boundary question left over from history, China has all along advocated managing differences through equal-footed consultation, actively seeking a fair and equitable settlement, and meanwhile, not letting it affect or interfere with the bigger picture of bilateral cooperation. I'm talking about issues relating to the boundary and territory. I think people should understand this. As we have seen, some forces have always sought to stoke tension between China and India and division between regions. Their attempts have put more and more thoughtful people in reflection and on alert. More people have come to realize that for China and India, both major countries with a population of over 1 billion, only by staying independent can we firmly grasp our own destiny and realize our goals of development and rejuvenation. China and India have a combined population of over 2.8 billion and account for 1/3 of humanity. When our two countries achieve stability and prosperity and live in peace and harmony, global peace and prosperity will have a solid foundation. As an Indian proverb goes, help your brother's boat across, and your own will reach the shore. We hope that India will work with China to uphold the strategic consensus that our two countries pose no threat, but offer development opportunities to each other, and continue to build mutual trust, avoid misunderstanding and miscalculation, so that we will be partners for mutual success instead of adversaries of mutual attrition. We must make sure that our relationship moves forward on the right track, bring more benefits to our peoples, and make greater contribution to the region and the world. Thank you.
下一问题，请北区第5排左起第2位中亚卫视 Olina。
谢谢，王毅部长您好，中华卫视记者提问：去年您访问中东多国，就实现中东和平稳定提出多项倡议。今年初，您又接待了中方多国外长和海合会秘书长访华。请问，在解决中东地区热点、建设性参与中东事务方面，将采取哪些举措？谢谢。
China Arab TV. Last year, you made multiple proposals for peace and stability in the Middle East. Early this year, you hosted the visits of some Middle East counterparts and the Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Why is so much attention on this region? What will China do to help calm regional hotspots and engage constructively with the Middle East?
长期以来，安全与发展
Security and development have long been two major challenges for countries in the Middle East. As a strategic partner of countries in the region, China follows an approach of double support to firmly support Middle Eastern countries in solving regional security issues through unity and coordination, and to firmly support people in the region in independently exploring their own development paths. Over the past year and more, China has put forward a 5-point initiative on achieving security and stability in the Middle East, a 4-point proposal for the political settlement of the Syrian issue, and a 3-point vision for the implementation of the two-state solution between Palestine and Israel, to promote the settlement of hotspot issues and realize regional and common security through dialogue. China and the countries in the Middle East have also stood together in the face of COVID-19 and engaged in joint vaccine production and drug research and development. The accelerated development of a free trade area between China and Gulf countries and the launch of a China-Iran comprehensive cooperation plan have added impetus to development in the region. China has always played a constructive role in the Middle East. We never intend to make geopolitical gains, still less to fill a so-called power vacuum. Over the past decades, the repeated interference from non-regional major countries in Middle Eastern affairs has hurt the region and its people time and again. This must not continue in the 21st century. The power to protect security and development in the Middle East must be returned fully to the people in this region. Support must be given to Middle Eastern countries as they promote peace through unity, pursue stability through self-reliance, and achieve development through cooperation to bring enduring peace and prosperity to the region. Thank you.
请南区第1排南起第2位女士提问，谢谢。
谢谢王国伟，我是深圳卫视执新闻的记者。我们看到中国同南太平洋岛国的关系不断深入，特别是在汤加、基里巴斯等国遭遇火山灾害和新冠疫情影响时，中国都是第一时间伸出援手。考虑到有些国家持续干扰破坏中国同南太岛国的关系，您对中国同南太岛国关系前景有何看法？谢谢。
Shenzhen Satellite TV. China is deepening relations with South Pacific Island countries by helping with their response to volcano eruption and COVID-19, even as certain countries try to sow discord. How do you see the future of China's ties with the Pacific Islands?
中国外交
China's foreign policy is characterized by a commitment to equality of all countries, regardless of their size. That is why the small island countries in the South Pacific have always received special attention and support from China. We will continue to treat South Pacific countries as equals and with mutual respect and trust, and support them in following development paths that suit their national conditions. We will continue to meet challenges together with South Pacific countries through mutual assistance. China has acted promptly to deliver emergency assistance to Tonga after the volcanic eruption, support the Solomon Islands in maintaining stability and stopping violence, and provide vaccines and medical equipment to South Pacific countries hit by COVID-19, demonstrating the spirit of a community with a shared future featuring solidarity in testing times. We will continue to conduct mutual learning and win-win cooperation with South Pacific countries. The two sides have carried out high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, and China continues to offer economic and technical assistance with no political strings attached. The China-Pacific Island countries' reserve of emergency supplies has been put to use, and a Climate Action Cooperation Center and a Poverty Reduction and Development Cooperation Center will soon start operation. China has been a good friend that South Pacific countries can trust. The two sides could work together to set a new example of mutual support, solidarity, and cooperation between countries of different sizes and with different systems. Thank you.
请南区第3排靠走廊海峡时报记者提问。
Thank you. A question from the Straits Times. Negotiations over a code of conduct within the South China Sea appear to have stalled over the last few years because it was initially meant to have been completed by the end of this year. Analysts are now saying that this is increasingly unlikely because of a range of issues, including China's opposition towards Southeast Asian countries having military operations, military exercises with countries that aren't within the region, and also there are issues about whether or not the code is going to be legally binding. So my question is, do you feel like parties can overcome these differences, and do you feel like the code should be legally binding? Thank you.
海峡时报，南海行为准则有关谈判在过去这些年进展十分缓慢。原本预计在今年年底能够结束，但是在东南亚与域外国家开展联合军演、准则法律效力等问题上分歧犹存。您认为相关国家能否克服这些分歧？准则是否应具有法律效力？
提起这个问题，我首先想到的是
On this
南海各方
issue,
行为
what
宣言。
first comes into my
今年
mind
是
is that
宣言签署
this year
20年
marks the 20th anniversary
来
of the
中国
signing of the
同东盟
Declaration
各
on the
国
Conduct of Parties in the
共同
South
落实
China Sea.
宣言的
Over the
各项
past 2
规定，
decades, China and ASEAN
保持
countries
了
have jointly
南海局势的
implemented the DOC and have ensured the overall
这应该
stability in the
首先
South China Sea.
充分的肯定。
This
当然，要
deserves,
实现南海
first
的
and
长治久安
foremost, our recognition.
我们需
But
要
of
达
course,
成
for lasting peace
更
and
加具有
security
实
to
质
take
内容
hold in the South China Sea,
更为
it
行之
is
有效的
necessary to
一些
form
规则
regional rules that
也
are
就
more
是要
substantive
有一个
and more
宣
effective.
言的升级版。
That is to say, we need
为此
an
各
upgraded
方
version of the DOC.
在当年签署宣言的时候
Therefore,
就明确
when signing the
要把制
DOC,
定
the
南
parties
海
made it
行为
clear
准则
in the
作为我
DOC
们的
that
长远目标
adopting a code of conduct in the South China
我们看
Sea
到中
shall
国
be the
同东盟
eventual
各国
objective.
启动准则磋商以来，
Since China and
已经
ASEAN
取得了
countries
很多
launched
积极的进
consultations
展
on the COC,
这两
much
年
has
主要
been
是因为疫
achieved
情的
due to the pandemic of the past 2 years.
磋商进程，
The consultation process
步伐慢
has
下来
been indeed
但
somewhat
是
slowed.
中方我们对达成准
Nevertheless,
则的前景
China
始终是充满信心。
still has full confidence in the prospect of finalizing the COC. Our confidence comes from the fact that advancing COC consultations serves the shared interests of China and ASEAN countries and is a crucial step to ensure that the South China Sea becomes a sea of peace and cooperation. The COC will not only be in line with international law, including UNCLOS, but also provide a more effective safeguard for the lawful rights and interests of countries outside the region. As the consultations enter a crucial stage, I believe it is important for both sides to pay attention to and handle well two things. First, we need to put our differences in perspective. Divergent views might appear in any consultation or negotiation. That is the same for the COC consultation as well. As long as all parties keep in mind that we share the same goal, no differences cannot be bridged, and no consensus is beyond reach. Second, we need to firmly thwart disturbances. Some countries outside the region are not happy to see the conclusion of the COC or tranquility in the South China Sea, because that would deny them the ground to meddle in the South China Sea for selfish gains. I hope that ASEAN countries will stay clear-eyed about this and jointly resist disturbances and sabotage attempts from outside with us. I am confident that no countercurrents created by outside forces could make waves in the South China Sea, and no external disturbance could stand in the way of regional cooperation. Thank you.
请北区第6排中间巴通社阿斯加尔。
Good afternoon. I represent Associated Press of Pakistan. Last summer, the world community witnessed the Kabul moment that the US withdrew hastily from Afghanistan. Currently, Afghanistan is facing the serious humanity crisis and threat of terrorism. What does China think all parties should do to support Afghanistan to weather this crisis? Thank you.
巴基斯坦联合通讯社，去年国际社会见证了美国从阿富汗匆忙撤军的喀布尔时刻。当前，阿富汗面临严重人道主义危机和恐怖主义威胁。中方认为，各方应如何支持阿富汗渡过难关？
The United States walked away irresponsibly from Afghanistan, leaving the Afghan people in a serious humanitarian crisis and creating enormous security challenges to regional stability. Afghanistan is in a critical transition from chaos to order. All parties must uphold the Afghan-led, Afghan-owned principle and support the Afghan people in exploring a development path suited to the national circumstances. The immediate priorities are to race against time to speed up the provision of humanitarian aid. We call on the immediate lifting of the freeze on Afghanistan's assets in the US and various unilateral sanctions to unconditionally return assets that belong to the Afghan people so as to avoid secondary damage to the Afghan people and help them get through the cold winter and embrace the coming of spring. China has promptly lent a helping hand to Afghanistan and will continue to provide additional assistance based on the Afghan people's needs. We're preparing for holding the third foreign ministers meeting among the neighboring countries of Afghanistan so as to harness and contribute our strengths as neighbors for the durable stability and security of Afghanistan. Thank you.
北区第5排中间第一位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人。总台央广记者提问。那王贵伟，我们知道今年年初的时候，您是成功访问了非洲3国，那这也是延续了中国外长连续32年成功每年首访非洲的这么一个传统。那么，请问中方将为落实中非合作论坛第8届部长级会议的成果，采取哪些措施，进一步促进
中非合作。那另外呢，有部分外媒认为中国在非洲制造所谓的债务陷阱，那对此您怎么看这个债务陷阱？谢谢。
China National Radio. Early this year, you visited 3 African countries, marking the 32nd year for the Chinese foreign minister to make Africa his first overseas destination. What will China do to implement the outcomes of the 8th FOCAC ministerial meeting and enhance China-Africa cooperation? What do you say to those who accuse China of setting up debt traps in Africa?
中国外长每年
Each year, the Chinese foreign minister will start his overseas visits with a trip to Africa. This reflects China's firm support for Africa's development and rejuvenation. Over the years, China has built over 10,000 kilometers of railways, up to 100,000 kilometers of highways, nearly 100 ports, and innumerable hospitals and schools in Africa. These are not debt traps, but monuments of cooperation. Last year was a big year for China-Africa cooperation. At the 8th Ministerial Conference of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, President Xi Jinping announced 9 programs for cooperation with Africa and called for building a China-Africa community with a shared future in the new era, adding new impetus to the growth of China-Africa relations. This year, we start implementing the deliverables of the Ministerial Conference. China honors its commitment for cooperation with Africa and never makes empty promises. We will champion the spirit of China-Africa friendship and cooperation and work with African countries on the following 3 priorities. First, we will vigorously advance anti-COVID cooperation with Africa. We will fully deliver on President Xi Jinping's pledge of providing 1 billion doses of vaccines to Africa and help Africa enhance capacity for localized vaccine production as Africa works toward the goal of vaccinating 60% of its population by the end of 2022. Second, we will further upgrade China-Africa practical cooperation. We will accelerate high-quality Belt and Road cooperation and work for early harvests under the 9 programs. We will synergize the Global Development Initiative with the African Union's Agenda 2063 and take concrete actions to support economic recovery and sustainable development of Africa. Third, we will act on the outlook on peace and development in the Horn of Africa. China has appointed a special envoy for the Horn of Africa and is prepared to engage in extensive communication with countries in the region and play a constructive role for the peace and development of the Horn of Africa and the African continent as a whole. Thank you.
请南区第4排左起第3位拉通社记者提问。
Good afternoon, Prensa Latina News Agency from Cuba. Minister, how do you assess the current state of relations between China and Latin America and the Caribbean after the reestablishment of the diplomatic ties with Nicaragua and Argentina, the entry of Argentina in the Belt and Road Initiative? In that sense, some countries, as the United States, accuse China of seeking geopolitical influence through its cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean. How do you respond, how China responds to that accusations? Thank you.
拉美通讯社，2021年，中国与尼加拉瓜复交，阿根廷加入“一带一路”倡议，中拉关系向前发展。您如何评价中拉关系现状？美国等一些国家指责中国与拉美地区开展合作是为了寻求地缘政治影响力。您对此有何回应？
首先，我要强调的。
I wish to stress at the outset that Latin America and the Caribbean is a region of promise and vitality. It is not the backyard of anyone. What the people in the region need is fairness, justice, and mutually beneficial cooperation, not power politics, hegemony, or bullying. China and LAC countries are members of the developing world. The shared aspiration for independence, development, and vitalization connects the Chinese dream closely with the LAC dream. Since COVID-19 hit, China has engaged in active cooperation with LAC countries and provided nearly 400 million doses of vaccines and some 40 million units of supplies to the region. Last year, trade between the two sides surpassed $400 billion for the first time. At the third ministers' meeting of the China CELAC Forum, the two sides reached extensive consensus on deepening China LAC strategic mutual trust and practical cooperation in priority areas in the next 3 years. As the Latin American proverb goes, a real friend is someone who's able to touch your heart from the other side of the world. China will continue to deepen friendship, expand cooperation, and work together with LAC friends for the China-LAC community with a shared future. Thank you.
请北区第4排中间，印尼安塔拉通讯社记者提问。
Good afternoon. I am from Indonesian Antara News Agency. The Indonesia-China bilateral relationship is getting more closer. The volume of bilateral trade between the two countries also increased significantly. By the end of year, the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed train will start be operating. How do you respond? This year, Indonesia becomes the president of the G20. How is China going to support Indonesia to carry out its mission expression of G20? Thank you.
印尼安塔拉通讯社，印尼与中国关系日益密切，双边贸易额大幅增加。雅万高铁年底将开始运营，您对双边关系有何展望？今年印尼也将担任20国集团主席国，中方将如何支持印尼做好这方面的工作？
我很高兴今年的记者会有机会
I'm really pleased that this year we have an opportunity to answer the question from an Indonesian journalist. China and Indonesia are both major developing countries and emerging economies. The two countries have extensive common interests and significant development potential. In recent years, under the strategic guidance of the two presidents, the China-Indonesia relationship has set an example of mutually beneficial cooperation between countries in the region and a model of strength through unity between developing countries. In the fight against COVID-19, China was among the first to send assistance to Indonesia and work with Indonesia on vaccine and medicine development. So far, China has provided 290 million doses of vaccines to Indonesia, more than any other country in the world. And China's Belt and Road Initiative and Indonesia's Regional Comprehensive Economic Corridor have formed deep synergy. Trade between the two countries grew nearly 60% year-on-year in 2021. The two sides have successfully launched a high-level dialogue cooperation mechanism and formed a new pattern of four-wheel drive cooperation covering political, economic, cultural, and maritime aspects. Going forward, China will deepen cooperation with Indonesia on an initiative to ensure that Indonesia becomes a vaccine production hub in the region. And they were also going to work together on a complete vaccine production chain to jointly build for the region a health shield against COVID. China will work for the early completion and operation of the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway to further boost Indonesia's post-COVID development and the mutually beneficial cooperation between the two countries. This year, Indonesia will host the G20 summit. China will surely actively provide support and facilitation. We are happy to see that under the theme of Recovery Together, Recover Stronger, we will advance cooperation in such fields as innovation, digitalization, green development, and health, and uphold the interests of the EMDCs so that the G20 can make greater contribution to world economic recovery and the better global governance. Thank you.
请北区第1排中间第1位男士提问，谢谢。
谢谢主持人，王国伟你好，我是中国日报记者。
今年中国日报客户端继续面向全球网友征集对您的提问，其中有一个问题大家特别关注。我们知道去年是中国共产党成立100周年，外交部积极主动在全球宣介中国共产党的故事。今年将迎来党的20大，您认为中国应该如何继续讲好中国共产党的故事？谢谢。
China Daily, a question for you on behalf of Chinese netizens. The Foreign Ministry did a lot to let the world know more about the Communist Party of China as it celebrated its centenary last year. What will China do in this area as the CPC will hold its 20th National Congress later this year?
这是一个很好的问题。
This is a very good question. The Constitution of China stipulates the CPC's status as China's governing party and makes clear that the CPC's leadership is a defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the greatest strength of the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Telling the stories of the CPC well and presenting, defending and promoting the good name of the CPC is an essential task and key responsibility that China's diplomatic service must undertake. Last year, we marked the centenary of the CPC with a number of outreach initiatives, including launching the 100 CPC Stories in 100 Days series, inviting foreign diplomats based in China and journalists from international mainstream media to revolutionary heritage sites in Yan'an and Jiaxing, and organizing over 4,000 celebration events of various types at our diplomatic and consular missions abroad. These initiatives and events were warmly received by friends around the world. We're fully aware that the CPC has gained more attention and recognition from the international community. More and more friends from around the world admire the great achievements of the Chinese people under the leadership of the CPC. More and more countries hope to learn about the secrets of the CPC's success. Last month, during his trip to China for the opening of the Beijing Olympic Winter Games, President Alberto Fernandez of Argentina made a point of visiting the Museum of the Communist Party of China to pay tribute to what the Chinese people have done and achieved in their development and progress. We can tell that people all over the world are viewing the CPC through brighter lens, from broader perspectives, and are acquiring a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of the CPC. As General Secretary Xi Jinping has noted, to understand the China of today, one must understand the CPC. This year, as the CPC will hold the 20th National Congress, we will continue to present its stories well, so that more international friends may truly understand the CPC. Thank you.
谢谢。因为时间的关系，
Thank you.
今天的
In
发
the
布会
interest of
到此结
time,
束。
this
谢谢王毅国
concludes
委员。
today's press
谢谢大
conference.
家。
Thank you, State Councillor Wang. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
There was a press conference from Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi during China's annual political season known as the Two Sessions. Overall, 27 questions were asked to the Chinese Foreign Minister, covering many hot issues in bilateral ties and, of course, hot spot issues in global governance. And for more insight, let's talk to our studio guests. Gentlemen, of the 27 questions asked in about 70 minutes time, almost 6 are somehow related to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. That's kind of a large portion and tells how the world attention is on this particular issue. And during this press conference, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has emphasized the two main directions for relative parties to be worked on in the next phase. What do you make of these two directions, Professor?
Well, I think Foreign Minister Wang Yi emphasized that right now the most important thing is to promote negotiation and dialogue to bring the war to an end. I think this is the most important thing, because when you look at other countries, they are pouring more fuel onto the fire. They urge the Ukrainian people to die, to fight to the last man standing. This is very unfair to the civilians in Ukraine, and this will not solve the problem. So I think what China is doing is the right thing, that is to urge negotiations and using diplomacy as the weapon to bring the war to an end, to minimize civilian losses. And this is the only right thing, and also to fully understand what are the fundamental differences between Ukraine on the one hand and Russia on the other hand. And as far as this NATO membership for Ukraine, it's a dead end because Russia will not accept it. And it's very encouraging to see that the Ukrainian delegation at the last round of the Russian-Ukraine negotiations are already pledged that they will no longer seek NATO membership. I think this is a very good step forward, and I think China will play a very important role to urge the two parties in the right direction with the aim of promoting peace and minimizing civilian losses. Now, on the other hand, it is obvious to all that the humanitarian crisis is escalating. More than 1.5 million Ukrainians have fled their country, and more are on their heels, and this will create a ripple effect on many European countries. So how the international community can do our homework to make sure that the humanitarian crisis is well handled and creating less, hopefully no, pain and suffering to the Ukrainian people. This is what China stands for, and I hope the international community will join in China's noble effort in this regard.
And talking about the humanitarian crisis, actually China has proposed 6 specific aspects to deal with this worsening crisis. What do you make of China's proposals, Mr. Tangen, in dealing with the humanitarian crisis?
Well, they're very commonsensical. They're really talking about how you have to set up a system and actually perform it. I mean, these people are in need. They need to have safe corridors. They need to be able to get out. They need to be taken care of. They need to be respected. There has to be some sort of plan, hopefully, for the return and things like this. So China is pushing that along. But I mean, one of the things that was notable about the approach in terms of democracy is that China made very clear that it's mutual respect for security interests, and that would apply to both Russia and Ukraine. Right now, clearly, China sees parallels between what NATO is doing to Russia and what AUKUS and all the U.S.-led coalitions are doing to China. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of sympathy there. China, but for the circumstances, China could see themselves in a similar situation. So they're really not only talking about Ukraine. Remember, this is not going to end with there, because if NATO continues to encroach into other areas, other countries that are previous Soviet bloc countries, you're going to continue to see this kind of pattern go on. There has to be a holistic solution that not only includes Ukraine, but the whole area.
And talking about that, Professor, we notice that talking about the so-called U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, Foreign Minister Wang Yi directly called it that it's an effort to create a so-called Indo-Pacific version of NATO. Should regional countries be very much aware or be very alarming about this intention?
Yes, this is a very important point. I would say this is one of the most important points that Foreign Minister Wang Yi said in his 70 minutes answer to the press. Why? Because China, together with Russia, oppose the continued expansion of NATO on the one hand, and this time, Foreign Minister Wang Yi very categorically labeled the Quad, for example, and the American attempt to promote the so-called Asia-Pacific Alliance as the Asian-Pacific version of NATO. This is very dangerous. This will really put China to the maximum alert, and China will mobilize all the resources possible to oppose that. And then China will also do its best to educate people in this part of the world. Don't fall victim to this American attempt to antagonize this part of the world, to divide and rule this part of the world, to create more tension or the prospect of war, rather than promoting peace and stability. This Quad seemingly designed to promote peace and stability, now is fully exposed to its real nature. That is, it is the Asian Pacific version of NATO. It is aimed at provoking conflict rather than solving conflict, and this may pave the way for more confrontation or even war. So we need to be on full alert. And I hope the American people will also oppose this, because what will serve for the fundamental interest of the American people is peace and stability rather than war and confrontation.
Well, gentlemen, we'll be getting back to you on this very soon. Now, let's cross live to my colleague Tian Wei at the Media Center in Beijing. Tian Wei, I noticed you raised a question to the Foreign Minister. Tell us more about his remarks.
Yes, indeed, Pan Deng, we got a chance, CGTN got a chance to ask the important question to the Chinese State Councilor, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, on the development of BRICS, because China will be the chair of BRICS countries this year. Meanwhile, also asking him about the role that the developing and emerging economies and countries will play in terms of their contribution to the global governance system. The Chinese State Councilor Wang Yi certainly gave very positive remarks, suggesting that the BRICS countries are not only going to be followers or walking with others side by side, but rather will be able in the future, hopefully, to lead in a way the march for global governance. That's a very interesting remark given by the Chinese side, because many know the global governance issue has been evolving very fast together with the geopolitics in the world. And today, during the press conference of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, one could tell very clearly that he's trying to break some of the stereotypes that others have about China. On that question about the emerging and also developing countries and the role of the BRICS countries, here are some of his answers. Let's roll this.
In the course of this year, China, Thailand, and Indonesia will host the BRICS Summit, APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, and the G20 Summit, respectively. Asia's time has come in global governance. In the race of global governance, we look forward to seeing EMDCs turning from followers to forerunners and even pace setters. Together, we can play a more active role, speak with a bigger voice, help make the international order more just and equitable, and promote more open, inclusive, balanced, and win-win globalization for all.
Now, that's a quote coming from the State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, talking about the role of the BRICS countries. As you can tell, the Chinese State Councilor during the annual presser is very clearly trying to break some of the stereotypes and refuses to be framed by some of the others about what China's foreign policies are and how is China going to be contributing to the global governance. Not only about the BRICS role and the G20 as well as the APEC, but also China's contribution toward establishing and also cooperating with others on the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and importantly, the initiative brought up by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, Global Development Initiative, during which China will contribute from different aspects, which has once again illustrated by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. While at the same time, China has been contributing to the development elsewhere in the world by bilaterally cooperating with countries, whether it is developing countries or developed economies. So this has reflected in his answers about bilateral relations with the EU, with ASEAN countries, with Latin America, with Africa, with some of the other important regions and countries. So, of course, there's hotspot issues about the Russia and Ukraine conflict. Once again, this is not one that China is trying to suggest China is going to stand with one or the other, but rather China is stating very clearly its principles, while at the same time trying to provide the details about what kind of support China will give to the humanitarian crisis obviously taking place over there. Chinese Foreign Minister gave many details about that as well. So overall, the general impression is China is strong-minded. Strong-minded not about its own past only, but also about peace and cooperation of the world. Back to you, Panda.
Thank you very much. My colleague Tian Wei at the Media Center in Beijing. So, gentlemen, let's follow up on that topic. China is strong-minded. I think it's fair to say also in developing equal and fair relations with developing countries and emerging economies. Mr. Tangen, having said that, what about ties between China and ASEAN countries? Yes, South China Sea may be still an issue, but what about the overall momentum? And because we know that China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement is in place and RCEP is in operation now.
Okay, I mean, my takeaway overall, and I really like Tian Wei's comments, was that China is putting forward a worldview that says, look, you have an aging hegemonic power, and you can trace a lot of the problems when we start talking about Afghanistan, the Middle East, etc., and even Ukraine right now. Those are all traceable back to the U.S. And what China is saying, look, we're instituting trade. We're trying to have sustainable goals. We're trying to be part of the international system. So it's a very different message that's going. And it's, right now, ASEAN is looking at what's happening in Europe and thinking to themselves, I'm sure, we don't want that happening here. So there are some very, very clear issues there. He did not answer directly the question about the code of conduct, but said, basically it's a diplomatic issue. But, all of these things, the turn towards Asia, the necessity of keeping Asia conflict-free, of countries exercising their sovereign rights to cooperate with whom they want on terms of trade, not to be buffaloed on security issues by people who are trying to, have, let us say, not the cleanest of motives. And I think that's clearly the U.S. So right now, I mean, China is, in this speech, I think the big takeaway is that China is presenting a different path, just as it has internally. It's also presenting one externally.
What about the China-Africa ties, Professor? Let's get out of the Western narrative, so-called dad trap, for a moment, and let's let facts speak. For example, Foreign Minister Wang Yi mentioned that China has built more than 10,000 kilometers of railways in Africa and even more than 100,000 kilometers of highways in Africa. What does that tell?
Well, first of all, it is true that China-African relations are deeply rooted, and for many decades, when Africa was the forgotten continent as far as America or European countries were concerned, China and many African countries were very close, shoulder to shoulder, to help them in their national liberation movements as well as in their political and economic development. Now, the so-called allegation of the death trap is a completely false accusation, because do you know which country owns China the most amount of debt? It's the United States. Why shouldn't any country accusing the United States or China of working on some death trap for the United States? No, the United States even today owns a lot of debt from China. And also when we look at the United States, when they built their nationwide railway system at the end of the 19th century, they borrowed heavily from whom? From the British and from many European countries. So to do any meaningful infrastructure project, you need equity as well as debt.
And it's more about deeds rather than words. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Victor Gao and Mr. Einar Tangen there. And that's it for this special coverage on CGTN on China's annual political season. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has just given a press conference. I'm Pan Zheng in Beijing. Stay tuned.